Hi nerds! Today I'm going to talk about my favorite version of story structure, and that is 4-part story structure. I first learned about 4-part story structure from a website called storyfix.com, which is run by an author named Larry Brooks. I don't know if Larry Brooks is the person who came up with this structure or not, but he's the one I learned it from, so that's who I'm giving credit to. 4-part is a lot like 3-act structure, except for Act 2 is divided into 2 parts, which gives you 4 equally sized parts to your story. 4-part story structure is my favorite structure simply because it just works better for my brain. It clicks for me better than any of the others do, and I like that I can set it up visually. Whenever I am about to start drafting a book, when I'm working on the outlining phase and I'm trying to figure out all of the big moments in my book, I draw out the 4-part structure as a box. I draw out the 4 parts in my notebook. It's just a simple box, and I label where the different points should go, and then I do a list of all the points so I can write out what happens at those big moments in the book. One day, if I have the space, I would love to dedicate at least part of a wall with some masking tape and note cards to do that instead of doing it in a notebook. But for now, this is the space I have, so it's what I do. The first part 1, is the setup. Just like in Act 1 or Stage 1, whatever structure you're using, that first part is always going to be the setup. This is where you're introducing your main character and the world and the conflict, the problem that they have to solve. Larry Brooks classifies your main character as an orphan in this part. Of course, that can be literal if you're writing Harry Potter, or also figurative. A little ways into part 1, where this dotted blue line is your hook or your inciting incident. This is something exciting that happens that gets your readers wanting to read more. It gives your characters a problem in their world that maybe they want to address, but they also aren't quite sure yet if this is something they want to do something about. So your character is kind of undecided about whether or not they're going to get involved in something, what they're going to do about it, how they feel about it, until you get to your first major plot point, plot point 1. This is in between parts 1 and 2, and it is where something happens where your character cannot ignore the problem anymore. They make a choice to act, which moves you on into part 2, which is the response. Part 2 is where your character is reacting to the problem. They are trying out different plans. Those plans probably aren't working, but they're trying to do something. Larry Brooks classifies the main character as a wanderer in this part. It's like I said, they're trying things out and they want to do something, but maybe they just aren't quite sure what the right thing to do is. Halfway through part 2, you have your first pinch point. The pinch points are my favorite part of 4-part story structure. A pinch point is a moment in the story where maybe your characters, but at the very least your readers, get a good glimpse of just how evil your bad guy is. The pinch point is where you cut away to show your villain torturing someone, or your main character overhears their best friend talking bad about them. It's just a little moment that raises the stakes, and like I said, just shows you how bad the bad is. Then at the end of part 2, you reach the midpoint, which has existed in every single version of story structure that I've talked about on here. This is, like all the other structures say, a big moment in your story where your main character cannot afford to just be a wanderer anymore. They have to become a warrior. It's where they have to actually come up with a firm plan of attack because what they've been doing has not been working. And that is why Larry Brooks calls part 3 the attack. He also says this is where your character becomes a warrior. This is where they are acting on their plan, they are fighting hard to defeat that bad guy. Even though it isn't working yet, they are trying their hardest. Halfway through part 3, you want to remind your readers of the stakes and how bad your bad guy or your antagonistic force is, which is why there is another pinch point halfway through this part. Your second pinch point is a lot like your first pinch point, just even worse. You really want to hammer in these stakes. And then as you cross over into part 4, you have your last major plot point, your plot point 2. This is where something happens, your character makes a choice that sets us off towards the final showdown. This is where Harry, Ron, and Hermione realize that Snape knows how to get past Fluffy, and they go racing off towards the Sorcerer's Stone to beat him. And then you have your part 4. It's your resolution. Within that, you have your climax. the final fight between your good guy and your bad guy, your main character and the antagonistic force. Your main character either wins or loses. This is where your main character is a martyr because they are willing to give up anything and everything to win. Larry Brooks also specifies that it is important during Part 4 that you release no new information. This doesn't mean that you can't have a big twist in Part 4, but you can't be loading new clues and information onto your characters during this part. By the time plot point 2 happens and you move into Part 4, your character knows what they need to know. Sure, Harry does not know that the bad guy is Quirrell, not Snape. That is your big reveal in Part 4, but he knows the spells he needs to know, he knows how to fly, Hermione knows about her plants, they've learned what they need. And that's 4-part story structure, my favorite. I find that it is detailed enough, it's more detailed for me than 3-act is, without being overly detailed like Save the Cat or 6-stage structure. It hits the sweet point for me, and like I said, it just works visually and clicks in my mind in a way that the others don't. And really that's the important thing with all of these story structures, is just figuring out what works best with your brain and your creative process, because it's different for everyone. And that's it for me today, nerds. I will see you this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time for our live chat.